Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman Dusty Johnson. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I first want to extend a big congratulations. You won re-election 2 weeks ago, but it was a big election for the GOP. The Republican Party is poised to take control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. So what are some of your main takeaways from the election?
Clearly, inflation was a major driver. But Brittany, I will also mention the border. Increasingly, as 2024 went on, people across the political spectrum in South Dakota were telling me they just could not understand how anyone could defend the crisis at the southern border. And I think inflation and border, along with, to a lesser extent, urban crime, really made folks just feel more comfortable trusting Republicans in D.C.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because that was a blaring issue, both of them, the border as well as inflation and the economy, when I talked to voters, pollsters, everyone. So what do you think the GOP's focus is going to be at the beginning of the term?
On inflation, I already think there's lots of good news. The inflation has slowed down in no small part because Republicans took the House 2 years ago. That meant that we were able to stop the $1 trillion giveaways. And listen, I don't like to trash people, but I would say it is very clear to me that the $13 trillion of spending and easy money that the Federal Reserve had done, the congressional spending plus the Fed, it just put way too much money out on the street. That triggered hyperinflation. You don't need to take my word for it. The broad consensus of economists agree with that. And so, frankly, things have gotten better because Republicans have been able to block that level of new spending. Things are only going to get better as Republicans bring even more fiscal sanity to bear. I'll give you one example of a real victory we had during the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which I helped to negotiate. We were able to cut $2 trillion of non-defense, non-VA discretionary spending over the course of the next 4 years. That was not enough, but it's an important first few steps in this marathon.
I want to talk about how you are going to specifically lower prices, because in my conversations with voters, especially the voters in those battleground states, I'm from Pennsylvania, I talk to Pennsylvania voters daily. The conversation is, my grocery bill is too high. It's tougher now to put food on the kitchen table than it was 4 years ago. So what are you going to do next term to help lower costs for Americans?
I think when a big problem we've got with government today is that everybody begins by assuming that more government money or more government mandates or more government regulation is going to solve the problem. Brittany, it's almost never the case. And so the definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. We all learned that in Microeconomics 101. And with the Republicans in control of Congress, you are going to see less of these $1 trillion giveaways. And so if what you want is less inflation, you have to be willing to tackle the root causes of inflation, which are too many dollars chasing too few goods. Republicans are going to get back to economic growth. That is going to create more goods. Republicans are going to get back to fiscal restraint and fiscal responsibility. That is going to mean fewer dollars. That is going to provide us an equilibrium on pricing, which will slow inflation dramatically.
As you noted earlier, one of the other top issues Americans are facing is immigration. And it was a big news week in South Dakota, specifically when it comes to national politics, because Governor Kristi Noem was tapped to be the DHS secretary. What's your reaction?
Kristi Noem is going to be great in that job. She's decisive. She understands what needs to be done. She isn't somebody who craves universal appeal. She knows that making hard decisions is occasionally going to ruffle feathers. She is willing to be a productive disruptor. She knows we have to secure the border. She knows that 8 million people illegally crossing the border in the last 4 years is impossible to defend. She's going to go do what has to be done for America.
I've talked to all types of people from all political backgrounds in the past 2 or so years, and Republicans and Democrats alike from all the states that I've talked to have agreed that there is a crisis at the southern border. They've said every state is a border state. So can you talk to us about what you see in South Dakota specifically? Are you dealing with migrants in any capacity? Does she have the experience to lead this department?
We know that 95% of the fentanyl and meth coming into this country come across the southern border. these drugs are wreaking a carnage on our communities. I would be shocked if there is a single county in America that didn't have more drug overdose deaths last year than they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It is indeed true that every community is a border community just because the drugs are absolutely destroying our families and communities. This is a solvable problem. When we secure the border, we'll be able to have more agents focused on drug interdiction rather than processing a couple million people entering the country illegally.
But do you think Governor Kristi Noem specifically has the experience to spearhead this initiative?
I mean, this isn't rocket science. I mean, what we need is somebody who is decisive enough and focused enough to go do what we all know needs to be done. That is put back into place for men in Mexico. It worked. It reduced border crossings by 85% over the course of just 6 weeks when President Trump put it into place 6 years ago. That is the kind of improvement we can have almost overnight. That, on top of making sure that we've got the dedicated men and women on Border Patrol focused on drug interdiction, is absolutely, I mean, Kristi Noem is absolutely capable of having that well-run organization meet its mission for America.
Last week, I had the opportunity to speak with a Democrat from South Dakota, vice chair of the South Dakota Democratic Party, Jessica Myers, and she said that she was a little more critical of the governor. She said the only thing that the state's Republicans and Democrats agree on is that they were, quote, thrilled that she's leaving the state and that she's tough to work with and for. Can you talk to us about your experience working with the governor, because it sounds a little different?
It's too bad Jessica, felt the need to throw sharp elbows as the governor went to go serve our country on an even larger level. It used to be that we could at least be happy for one another in politics. Even if we didn't agree on everything, we could say nice things as their retirement, or we could say nice things as they got a promotion, or we could try to talk about the common ground. I would say this about Kristi Noem. She and I have a great working relationship because we're both purpose-driven. We both love this country. We both know the importance of bending the arc of history toward freedom. She is a true believer, and apparently she's made some decisions that maybe have ruffled the Democratic activists' feathers in South Dakota. I would tell you that is just fine by me, and that is just fine by the overwhelming majority of South Dakotans. I mean, let's remember, Governor Nome was overwhelmingly elected for re-election just a couple of years ago. So who knows? Maybe there's some sour grapes coming from the state Democratic Party.
But you were happy last week when Senator John Thune was elected the next Senate Majority Leader. That's a pretty big bump, and he's from South Dakota as well. What's your reaction to that news?
John Thune's going to be great in that job. Both he and Kristi Noem are going to be great champions for this country. I've talked to them both in the last couple of days. We're friends. John Thune's got the trust of his colleagues. He knows what has to be done. He understands that Republicans cannot squander this incredibly special opportunity of unified government. He is ready to get going, and he's going to do what he has done his whole career, and that is serve with grace, serve with wisdom, and serve forces greater than himself. He's a remarkable patriot.
You called Thune's election, quote, a new day in America. So what do you think that means for the future of the GOP?
Well, I don't know that John Thune is some huge departure. I mean, I think he runs what has always been the best aspects of the Republican Party, which is a focus on limited government, personal responsibility, the power of institutions like faith and family, and the need to move toward less regulation, lower taxes, more community safety. So I don't know that it's a new day so much, other than the fact that clearly having the White House, the Senate, and the House is going to give Republicans an opportunity to do even more good things. But John Thune is going to be great at that job.
President-elect, since he was elected less than 2 weeks ago, has wasted no time in nominating members of his cabinet. He also suggested that he would use recess appointments to potentially circumvent Senate confirmation hearings. Thune acknowledged that the confirmation process is going to be tough, and he posted this on X. We must act quickly and decisively to get the president's nominees in place as soon as possible, and all options are on the table to make that happen, including recess appointments. Do you agree? Do you think there should be recess appointments, especially when it comes to these nominations, which have been pretty critical?
Ultimately, I think you're going to have the overwhelming majority of the president's nominees get confirmed through a traditional Senate process. I don't have a say in that. That is not a role that the Constitution provides to the House. It provides it to the Senate. But this is a natural part of the Constitution. It's a natural part of the separation of powers. Elections have consequences. The president gets to nominate who he or she wants, and then the Senate gets to ask them the tough questions and to make sure that they're going to serve the best interests of this country long term. So this will be a natural process that'll play out over the course of the next few weeks. What I do know is that with some of the great nominees that Donald Trump has put forth, we're going to be in a position to get a lot of great things done for this country.
I just want to ask you about the cabinet nominees. How do you think it's shaping up? I'll just read a few. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Attorney General Matt Gaetz, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., UN Ambassador Elise Stefanik, Border Czar Tom Homan, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. What do you think of these nominees? Are you excited for the cabinet next year?
Well, I can only really speak to those that I know personally, like Elise Stefanik. She's she's a once-in-a-generation leader. She is going to bring much-needed reform and a little bit of productive disruption to the United Nations. I think she understands the power of strong multilateral organizations. She also understands how you can get a certain amount of groupthink and, frankly, institutional rot that can set in. She is going to make sure that American values, the kind of rules-based international order that America helped to erect in the wake of World War II, is strong and focused on these freedom values that are frankly, under attack by outfits like the Chinese Communist Party. Elise has worked with me month in and month out for a long time to push back on the Chinese Communist Party. When you've got Donald Trump putting forth nominees like that, it's easy to get excited.
Well, Congressman, there's certainly a lot to look out for as the next term starts in just about 2 months, and I hope you come back on and join us again for more conversations. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.